Almost every online giving company now offers a feature where you can ask your donors to cover the fees involved with processing credit cards. But the question I want the answer to is that helpful? Should churches or other nonprofits ask their donors to cover the fees? And what does the data have to say about it? Well, the answer just might surprise you. Let's do this. Well, hey guys, I'm Thomas Costello here from REACHRIGHT. We put out content like this for church leaders every single week. So if you're into these kinds of things, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. It'll mean a lot to us. Now, I have long wondered, should churches be asking their donors to cover the fees? Every online giving company gives you the option to do this nowadays. And on the surface, it kind of makes sense. Think about it. The average credit card transaction online costs a church 3% when you factor in all the fees. So for even a small to medium-sized church, just as an example, let's use $100,000 of annual income for the church. If you're processing about 60% of that online, that means $60,000 of your income as a church is going to have a 3% fee on top of it. That's nothing to sneeze at, and who wouldn't want an extra $2,000 every year? So on the surface, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Maybe we should ask our donors to cover the fees, but I wanted to dig in a little bit deeper to that because I had this thought just the other day. I was at a burger joint with my family. It's our local one, and they added this new policy that anybody that uses a credit card is going to have a 3% surcharge charged to them on top of that. And if I'm being really honest, well, that just rubbed me the wrong way. I begrudgingly gave them my credit card because I didn't have any cash at the time to give them, but that 3% fee, while it was only $1 or $2, it just didn't sit well with me. And I started to wonder, is that something that may bother people when they're giving at a church too? Or maybe you can relate to this. I recently was in California and I noticed a very major difference in the way they charge for gas. On every gas station sign, there's two totally distinct columns for pricing. One is the cash price and the other is a credit price. And you pay on average 10 to 20 cents more for every gallon if you want to use the convenience of using your credit card on that transaction. And that transaction fee is much higher than the 3% that churches may pay. But I have to say, in both of those scenarios, it leaves me feeling less than stellar when I really think about it. And that made me wonder if anybody has ever done any research on this topic. Has anybody done the digging into whether or not churches should be asking for donors to cover the fees? Well, one group that has been doing the research is the companies that provide online giving. 4 separate studies from DonorDrive, Neon, Classy, and GiveSource, they all found that the majority of donors will cover the fees when given the opportunity. And the range was anywhere from 50 to 65% of donors saying, yes, I will take care of the fees there. So it seems like it should be a no-brainer. If most people are going to do it, why not do it? Well, that's where a couple of other studies come in. One of the questions we should ask ourselves as church leaders is, does asking donors to cover the fees lead to more donations? This study was really surprising. It was done by the American Cornerstone Institute, and they actually did a study with over 4,000 visitors to their donation page. They actually ran an A/B test with one donation page asking donors if they would like to cover the fees, and the other one not even mentioning it at all. And here's what they found. The conversion rate on the one that did not ask donors anything to do with covering donation fees had a 12% conversion rate. On the other hand, when they asked donors if they would like to cover the fees, the conversion rate dropped all the way down to 7.4%. That is a 38% decrease in the number of people that completed the transaction. Now, that's not to say that your church is going to find those same kinds of numbers, but this one non-faith-based organization did find a dramatic reduction in the number of people that actually made a donation when they brought up this idea of covering the fees. Here's how they summarized it. The big takeaway from this experiment was the negative impact that adding transactional language had in the conversion process. Donating is largely an emotional action, and introducing transactional language like fees resulted in potential donors abandoning the process. That 3% savings was nowhere near the 38% decrease they saw in the number of people that were completing donations. And one other question we'd probably ask is, what does that mean for recurring donations? Well, one study went even further on this. According to Fundrise, donors that made donations under $80 for their first donation were 14% less likely to make another donation if they were asked to cover the fees during that first donation. So what we see from this is that there seems like there's real data that shows not only are people less likely to complete their donation, they're also less likely to give again in the future if we ask them to cover the fees. In reality, while you might save 2 or 3% and that few $1,000s might be worth it, it might cost you thousands and thousands of dollars in donations that never come in because we're introducing this transactional language that we really don't want our donors thinking about. If I think about it, when I'm going through a donation process, the last thing I want to be thinking about is what are the administrative expenses of the organization that I'm giving to. And if we can just leave that out, I really believe we're going to have better results. Now, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. These studies were not done with churches. They're not done when we're thinking about people that are giving towards their church or a tithe. But in the end, I think the conclusions are strong enough to infer that we probably will see a difference in churches if we are asking donors to cover the fees. Maybe you have a spiritual reason for it. I don't personally have one, but maybe you think it is important in full disclosure to let people know where all their money is going for. And for that, I say more power to you. But if the goal is just to get as many people taking that first step towards giving, or to get as many people as possible to be recurring givers towards your church, it seems that the data and most people's personal experience tends to show that it's better to not ask your donors to cover the fees. But I want to know what you think. Does your church ask your donors to cover the fees? If so, did you see any kind of a change when you started doing so? Let us know down in the comments, and we'll catch you next time.